Hey everyone, welcome back to our Getting to Know the Speaker series. This week I'm really excited to introduce somebody who was just recently added to our schedule. We got a lot of great stuff to talk about with him and stuff for him to let us know about. So why don't we just jump in? I'd like to introduce you to Sunil from CloudBees. How you doing?
Hey, how you doing, Chris?
Good, good. Yes, very nice to meet you. Thank you for being available today. All right, so we are a week, at least for us, it's a week away from Flow Factor, and looking forward to seeing you in person, Sunil, and of course everybody that will be coming. So why don't we start off a little bit getting to know you. Tell us a little bit about your background, kind of how you got to the role that you're in today.
Sure, absolutely. So I've always been in the software configuration management industry ever since I started my career. And, that's probably about 27, 28 years now. But the last 10 years of that career path has been more prevalent in the DevOps transformation realm, right? And I've worked for companies like Xavier Labs and Electric Cloud, and now CloudBees, helping customers transform. And this is really transforming their software delivery pipelines, trying to get to a proper software delivery management platform where ARO, application release orchestration, plays a really big part of that puzzle.
Okay, so when we were talking just before this, I wanted to start digging into the whole ARO idea.
Sure.
So why don't we do that now?
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit about that. Why don't we just start with what is that? Give us maybe a little bit of detail about it, and then we can jump into some more after that.
Absolutely. Enterprises today, every company is a software company, right? They all develop software. And in most cases, you'll find that they don't develop just one application. It becomes multiple applications. And the problem around that is that every application has its own technical challenges. Not only is the application, dependent on other applications, but you have dependencies across different technologies, databases, middle tier messaging systems, for example, and in a lot of cases also infrastructure, right? Today we deploy to the cloud, and maybe the application can be deployed to AWS, but someday AWS might be a little bit more expensive, and we say, well, why can't we just switch over to Azure because Azure is cheaper? And so the ability to deploy on demand to different platforms and coordinate the activities around the release activities around those applications is what application release orchestration really is all about. It's the complexities around release management that brings the people, process, and tools together.
Okay, awesome. So you mentioned AWS and other environments. So one of the things that I personally have always been impressed with when it comes to, say, continuous delivery or the notion of like a blue, green, or canary kind of deploy, is that Amazon has always had some really good techniques for that, whether it's at the autoscaler level to just sort of swap in, two different EC2 instances. What sort of solutions do you guys bring to the table that help make that maybe platform neutral?
So one thing I always emphasize is technology, being technology agnostic, right? So when you talk or are developing within a platform like AWS, you're kind of segmented to that platform. You're utilizing all the great services that AWS provides, right? But the minute you step out of that realm, it now becomes a little harder to ingest an application that's coming from the outside. And if you take an example of a large enterprise, a bank, for example, they thrive on their legacy applications that were developed 10, 15 years ago. They can't just do a lift and shift into a cloud, even though a lot of them talk about lift and shift into the cloud. So that's the bread and butter. How do you take that bread and butter application and combine it with new greenfield technology, right? And still have a very effective release schedule where all these dependencies are being met, right? And coordinated well enough in an automated way. And so that's what a tool like Flow brings, from CloudBees. That's what Flow does. It allows you to manage that complexity very, very effectively.
Okay. And do you see that, again, just talking more about application release orchestration as a general concept, do you see that that's something that in order to have an effective orchestration, you need a third party tool? Are there open source solutions to do this? Do most people sort of roll their own? Obviously, you guys have a product, but
Yeah.
what's sort of the
Yeah.
landscape look like for that?
Well, in today's day and age, there are very few competitors in this market, right? And CloudBees, of course, is one of those premier product offerings, right, of Flow. People have attempted to really build out this product per se, using different tools and different mishmash of, we call it the DevOps tool chest, right? Now you can do it using open source tools. Yes, if you have the people, the money, the tool, the resources, or you can go out and buy an off-the-shelf product like Flow. But the reality is there are very, very few products like Flow that are out on the market. And so competition is very, very close. Obviously, there are large corporations that don't believe in off-the-shelf products, and so they go out and open source it and build their own. Great for them, right? At the end of the day, a product like Flow has been on the market for over 12 years, and it's been addressing these few key items around release management, deployment automation, and analytics and metrics, right? All on one platform. So it does it really well.
Okay, awesome. Well, so you touched on a couple of things that triggered some thoughts in my head when you said, large companies that build their own. The first company that comes to mind is Netflix. And it seems like whenever there's anything in this space, Netflix did something many, many years ago and then open sourced it. And of course, that's an ever evolving landscape as they stop supporting things and maybe change attention. Is there anything that we might have heard of on the Netflix OSS stack that sort of touches on some of these characteristics? Since I don't know much about the product, which maybe we can hear more about later. I'm just trying to connect it with something else that I'm maybe more.
Yeah. So Netflix, Netflix is one of those curiosities where they've been very open source oriented, right? But they also started with a very greenfield type application. They went to microservices fast, and so for them to push I should say more to push their technology at a rapid pace, they had to evolve a whole lot faster too. And so while they were developing their tooling, they were also developing their application infrastructure. The difference between a Netflix and a bank like Wells Fargo, Bank of America, is that those banks don't have, one, they don't have the bandwidth to do that. Two, they're more regulated, and so they don't have the ability to just say, push a button and go to production, right? It's clear delineation of duty between different resources, different teams, different business units. And so it becomes a difficult task to just say, I've checked in my code and push it all the way through to production, right?
Okay.
There's regulations, there's audits, there's traceability that needs to occur. Not saying Netflix doesn't do that. They absolutely do it, I'm sure. But the fact is that in a regulated world, which is where we come and play a really big part, the auditability and the traceability, the security aspect of all these things come into play.
Okay, awesome. I like it. Yeah, looking forward to hearing more about it next week. So one of the things that we typically talk about with folks during this process or during the interview is if I'm, like you said, I'm a bank or I'm a large organization and I'm moving to the cloud because, Flow Factor is about microservices and cloud technology. So I'm going to move to the cloud and I want to start taking maybe even my monolith and just getting it into a cloud environment. What would be your recommendations as sort of first steps for a company looking to adopt a cloud platform as their new environment?
So that's a really good question, right? My advice has always been, don't upset something that's working for you right now. Leave your monolith as is. That's the first thing. Two, take a look at the architecture and see if you can distill it into your new greenfield type stuff. In other words, containerization, serverless, microservices, right? and look at how you can become turn that application into maybe multiple stateless applications, but so you can push changes to that application without having to manage one large release, at any single point. And so the ability for a tool like Flow, for example, to sit above all that and plug in all these different integrations and allow you to manage your monolith plus your greenfield, right? Or your migration to your greenfield all at the same time provides a huge business value. You're not shutting down your business, to go greenfield or to new technology. And at the same time, you're enabling the adoption of cloud technology by being able to deploy to cloud platforms like AWS or Azure, or even your local hybrid infrastructure, whatever that may be.
Okay, awesome. Well, that maybe is a good segue to talk for a few minutes about your presentation. Currently on the schedule, it's 9:40 to 10:15, so that puts you sort of right after our keynotes. And it's titled Blueprint for Application Release Orchestration. What can folks expect if they show up at your presentation?
So my presentation is really about what people are experiencing today. Everything around their release management pains. There's not only many people that are associated with the release, there's a plethora of tools that they have to touch. Release managers are known for being, coordinators, but they have to talk to people. They have to check email. They might have massive spreadsheets where they have to go step by step, for these monolithic releases. They have to do coordination between test teams and infrastructure teams, right? They have to ensure that the operations guys are satisfied, because you can't just push a button and go to production. So all these things that are painful to them is what I'm going to talk about and say, and provide my experience around application release orchestration and how I've done it, using tools like Flow.
Okay, awesome. And just to double check, because I think you just mentioned it, but we talked about it earlier, this presentation is meant not just for technical folks, but really maybe even managers or the non-technical.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think in a lot of cases, you'll see that the release managers have a straddling effect between the business and the technical, and they're the starting point, right? You do have the technical folks that understand these technologies, but the release managers are the ones that start to bubble up their metrics, their information up through, their directors and the VPs and the CIOs and CTOs, right? And so the ability to span that audience is where my presentation is targeting.
Okay, awesome. Sounds great. Thanks for the background and also for telling us a little bit about yourself.
You're welcome.
One of the last things I've been wrapping each of these interviews up with is a little Easter egg, sort of a question that you can put out to our listeners so that something they can think about between now and next week, but also something they can come and talk to you about at the event.
Sure.
Do you have a question for folks?
Yeah, my biggest question is, how are you managing your releases today? And what are you doing to manage the massive pain points that your releases are inflicting on you, right?
Awesome.
And we'll leave it at that, because that I'm sure is going to open up a can of worms.
Okay, awesome. Well, thank you so much for dropping in today. Like I said, a week away and we'll get to hang out and see each other. So looking forward to it.
Same here, Chris. Look forward to it.
All right. Thanks so much. Have a good afternoon.
Thanks. You too. Bye-bye.